And so, speaking of the Russian language,
Yeah.
so I think one of my favorite parts in the book, because I'm studying the Russian language, I love the Russian language, is where you talk about the mystic roots and
Yes,
and
yes,
the tonal qualities of the language. Could you
yes, yes,
expand on that
yes.
a little bit?
Yeah, well, the tonal qualities um, in the it's a language that's ideally suited to the Orthodox liturgy, and in the Orthodox liturgy, everything seems to be sort of an octave lower than in the Western Catholic or Protestant liturgy. So it sort of activates different chakras, and this is one of the things that makes the Orthodox liturgy so powerful.
Mm.
But the language, I mean, it's an Indo-European language, which means it's related to Sanskrit, and you can see you can see much more clearly than in other European languages how it's related to Sanskrit. I mean, there's a story about a an Indian professor who was visiting Russia. I think back in the 1950s, and visiting a family in Russia. And one woman from this family was taking him around a village, and she pointed to a house and she said, "That's our house." In Russian, "Это наш дом," "Это наш дом," and he was astonished because he said that would be almost the same in Sanskrit.
Really?
Something like "Это наш дом," "Это
Hmm.
наш," and other words and phrases. And so he at one point he thought he was listening to Sanskrit when in fact he was listening to Russian.
Wow.
So it has very, very ancient roots, the language, and very beautiful language for poetry, for example. It has enormous flexibility as a language. You can say things. You can say things poetically in Russian that you can't say in other languages.
Hmm. So you mentioned in our email correspondence that you had started to read Dead Souls by Gogol. Gogol, did
Yeah,
you read it? Are you reading it in Russian
yeah.
or
No,
translation?
I'm being lazy. I'm reading it in English.
Oh yeah, it's actually one of my goals to read it in Russian eventually. But I've been studying the language for a couple years, but I'm nowhere near I could read a novel. It would take me a couple years to read a Russian novel right now.
Oh, well, it's a very intriguing book.
I'm really glad you think so, because it's if I could think of all the books I've read that have most just stuck in my mind, that would be in the
Yes,
top 10. It's been in my mind
yes,
since I read it
yes.
when I was a kid.
Well, it has this very Russian mixture of sort of gloom and melancholy and cynicism, combined with absolutely hilarious humor. I mean,
Right?
I found myself laughing almost at many passages in it. But I was also aware that there is a deeper level. There are sort of esoteric levels in it. I mean, he talks about, for example, one of the characters in it reading a book by the German mystic Eckartshausen. And there's another character who has a little temple on his estate with a sign that says that the Temple of Solitary Contemplation. So there's something going on there, which may become clearer to me as I read on through the book.
That's very validating for me because, like I said, I had this sense that there's something at work in that book, and I just wasn't sure what it was. And I've never met anybody else who read it before, so thank you for the validation, making me feel like less of a crazy person.